Are you ready to go? Oh, it is good to be back in Wisconsin. Good to be back in the Midwest. And good to be back in Milwaukee. Now, you may have noticed we're doing our rally a little early because we have to wrap up before the Packers-Lions game starts. So, cheeseheads, don't worry. I'm not trying to compete against that. And the Bears are also playing, so. Hey. Right now we're on the same team, people. I am here for a very important reason, and that is to ask you to vote for one of my favorite congresswomen, Gwen Moore, for your wonderful Senator, Tammy Baldwin, and for the next President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Now, if you have not voted yet, today is the last day of early voting in Milwaukee. You can still get it done before the game. I won't be offended if you leave right now. If you have an absentee ballot, do not put it in the mail at this point. Bring it to a drop box at any early voting site. And if you can't vote early, make a plan to vote on Election Day, November 5th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Just go to let me make sure I get this right, wisdems.org/vote. And that'll tell you where you can go. And remember to bring your photo ID. And then get your friends and your family to make a plan to vote too, because together, in 3 days, we have a chance to choose a new generation of leadership in this country and start building a better and stronger and more hopeful America. Now, I don't think it's any news to you that this election is going to be tight. It's going to be tight because a lot of Americans are still struggling. You know, as a country, sometimes I think we forget we have been through a lot over these last few years. We had a historic pandemic that wreaked havoc on communities and businesses and families. The disruptions from the pandemic caused price hikes that put a strain on family budgets. And even before the pandemic, a lot of Americans felt that no matter how hard they worked, treading water was the best they could do. So I understand why people are looking to shake things up. What I cannot understand is why anybody would think Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that is good for you. Because there is absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself. This is a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down that golden escalator 9 years ago. And we've seen it for over a decade now, this show of his. The late night tweets, all caps. The weird tangents and crazy conspiracy theories. The constant attempts to sell you stuff. Gold sneakers, a $100,000 watch, even a Trump Bible. He wants you to buy the Word of God, Donald Trump edition. He's got his name right there next to Matthew and Luke. Who does that? The point is, Donald Trump is not thinking about you. His entire campaign, just like his entire presidency, has always been based on him. It's about him, his status, his money, his ego, his grievances, his insecurities. He wants the middle class to pay the price for another huge tax cut that would mostly help him and his buddies. He doesn't care if he costs more women their reproductive freedom, because apparently he doesn't think that it's going to affect him. It won't make a difference in his life. But most of all, Donald Trump wants us to think that this country is hopelessly divided between us and them, between real Americans, quote unquote, who support him, of course, and outsiders who don't. Because he thinks that having America divided, having people angry and resentful, will increase his chances to get elected. It's as simple as that. And I'm here to tell you, Milwaukee, we do not need another 4 years of Trump's arrogance and incompetence and division. America's better than that. America's ready to turn the page. America's ready for a new story, a better story. We are ready for a president, Kamala Harris. And the good news is Kamala Harris is ready for the job. This is a leader who has spent her life fighting on behalf of people who need a champion. Kamala was raised by a middle-class family, mostly by a single mom. She knows what it's like to have to scrap and save to make ends meet. When she was in college, she worked at McDonald's to help put herself through school. She didn't pretend to work at McDonald's when it was closed. Her mom was I guess, 5 feet tall, little brown woman with an accent. And you can imagine that she wasn't always given her due. But her mom taught Kamala and her sister to not only stand up for herself, but to also stand up for injustice. And that's exactly what Kamala has been doing her entire career. As a prosecutor, Kamala stood up for children who had been victims of sexual abuse. As Attorney General of the state of California, she fought the big banks and for-profit colleges, securing billions of dollars for people that had been scammed. And after the mortgage crisis, Kamala pushed me and my administration hard to make sure that homeowners got a fair settlement. So again and again, Kamala has fought for people who needed a voice, who needed a champion, and she delivered on their behalf. That's who Kamala is. And you may not agree with every decision she makes, but I can promise you, if you elect her, she will see you and hear you, and she will have your back every single day, and she will work hard on behalf of all Americans. And by the way, she'll have an outstanding partner in Governor Tim Walz. I love that dude. He is a veteran, he's a teacher, he's a coach, he was a great governor. Turns out he can even take a vintage truck apart and put it back together again. You think Donald Trump can do that? Do you think Donald Trump has ever changed a tire in his life? If he gets a flat tire, he calls his chauffeur, Jeeves. Jeeves, change that tire. I don't know if his chauffeur is actually named Jeeves, but I like to think it's Jeeves. The point is, if you elect Kamala and Tim, they know something about your life because it's been their life. They'll be focused not on their problems, they'll be focused on yours. And that's why, for so many of us, the choice in this election seems like it should be so clear. I mean, on the one hand, you've got a former president whose time in office was characterized by so much chaos and scandal that he was impeached not once, but twice. Twice. And on the other end, you've got somebody who cares about working people and who has served with distinction in every office that she has ever held. But here's the thing, Milwaukee. We live in a big country. Wisconsin's a big state. People have a lot of different points of view. There are voters out there who are just as passionate about Trump as we are about Kamala. And just like the last two elections, this one is going to be determined by a handful of people who are genuinely torn about who to vote for or are debating whether to vote at all. Which is why, if y'all don't mind, I want to speak directly to those who may be watching, maybe listening, friends of yours, maybe a few of you who are still here, who are still undecided. Those of you those of you who see Donald Trump's flaws but don't feel like you know Kamala well enough. Or those of you who are concerned about democracy but are more concerned about making ends meet. Or those of you who understand the difference between the two candidates but don't think this election will actually make a difference in your life. Now, when I talk to folks that are genuinely undecided, the first thing they'll say is that they want a president who will improve the economy. And that makes sense. Even though wages are steadily growing, unemployment is relatively low, inflation is finally slowing, but the price of everything from healthcare to housing to groceries is still too high. The question I ask them, the question I think we all have to ask ourselves is, who's really going to do something about it? Now, in talking to people, I've realized, so I want to address this. It turns out one of the reasons people think Donald Trump will improve the economy is because they watched The Apprentice. I'm serious. No. I'm not kidding. I mean, I've heard this people say this. I happened to miss that show when it was running, but it was really popular. So I want everybody to be clear. That was not reality. That was a reality show. The truth is, Donald Trump was given $400 million by his daddy. That's how he got rich. And somehow his company still managed to declare bankruptcy 6 times. So let's put that aside for a second. When it comes to actual policy, Donald Trump has offered up 2 ideas. The first is, once again, he wants to give another massive tax cut to billionaires and big corporations. Now, some people might hear that and they say to themselves, well, I remember the economy being pretty good when he first came into office. It was, because it was my economy. I had spent 8 years cleaning up the mess the Republicans left me. Y'all remember, auto plants all across the Midwest, including here in Wisconsin, flat on their backs, on the verge of bankruptcy. And we worked and we worked. And after 8 years, I then handed off over 75 straight months of job growth and low inflation to Donald Trump. And the only thing his tax cuts did back then was to help folks that were already doing good and drive up the deficit in the meantime. Trump's other big idea is to slap a tariff on everything from food to TVs. Now, almost every economist who has looked at this idea says that won't lower prices, that makes prices higher. And when he's challenged on this point, Trump will brag about, well, look at gas prices. They were $2 a gallon when I was in office. You know why gas was so cheap? Because there was a global lockdown during COVID and nobody was driving. And he's talking about it like it was the good old days. I want us to remember that. Yes, gas was super cheap because we were stuck inside the house. Nobody was buying gas. So then I'll hear people say, well, at least Donald Trump sent me a check during the pandemic. Well, y'all have heard this. I guarantee you some of you have heard this from somebody. So I want to clear this up as well. At the start of COVID, Democrats and Republicans joined together to send out emergency checks. Tammy was there. And you know what? Joe Biden worked with Congress and sent out an emergency check during the pandemic. Just like I worked with Congress to give people emergency relief during the Great Recession. There was not anything unique about what Donald Trump did, except, unlike Joe Biden and me, he put his name on the check as a marketing tool. I'd never thought of that. For me, for Joe Biden, it was not about taking credit and advancing our politics and feeding our egos. It was about helping people during tough times. So, the point is, for those of you who are still making up your minds out there, do not give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt because he was on a reality show. And certainly do not give him credit for an economy that he inherited. There is only one candidate who has offered serious ideas about how to drive down prices and make this economy work for everybody, and that is Kamala Harris. She's going to go after corporations that unfairly jack up prices. She's got detailed plans to work with local governments and the private sector to build 3 million new affordable homes all across America and then help first-time home buyers with their down payments. She's going to give a tax cut to 100 million middle-class and working Americans, helping small businesses get started, helping first-time parents with the basic costs of having a child. Now let's talk about health care. If you ask Donald Trump what he's going to do to make health care more affordable, he's got one answer, and that is repeal the Affordable Care Act. And he's not by himself. The other day, the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said there would be, quote, no Obamacare if Trump wins. Now, do not boo. No. Now, neither of them can really explain why they want to end it, except for the fact that I did it. The problem they have is, guess what? The Affordable Care Act works. Almost 50 million people have gotten health care because of it. Another 50 million have the security of knowing insurance companies can't deny them coverage because of a pre-existing condition. the more people benefit, the more popular it has become. Which is why a couple weeks ago, some of y'all saw this, Trump's running mate, Mr. Vance, do not boo, vote. Mr. Vance had the nerve to say Donald Trump, quote, salvaged the Affordable Care Act. What? What? Donald Trump spent his entire presidency trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, trying to tear it down, and he couldn't even do that right. And now, 8 years after he was elected, he was asked, well, if you did repeal it, what would you replace it with? And he looked, and he kind of fumbled around, and they said, well, I've got concepts of a plan for how to replace it. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Let's say your boss gives you an assignment, says, I need it by Friday. Friday rolls around. Your boss comes up to you, says, did you finish that project for me? You say, well, actually, I haven't started, but I do have a concept of a plan. Or you could try it at home. Honey, did you do the dishes? You throw out the trash? I've been watching this football game, but I do have a concept of a plan to do the dishes. How's that going over? You're on the couch. If it would not work for you, why should it work for the President of the United States? It shouldn't. The good news is Kamala Harris doesn't have concepts of a plan. She has actual plans to limit out-of-pocket health care costs, to keep lowering prescription drug prices. And Kamala Harris understands the threat to women's health that has been posed by the decision of Donald Trump's Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. Since then, we have seen effective abortion bans in 20 states. Infant mortality rates have begun to tick up. Doctors are afraid to provide potential life-saving treatment to at-risk mothers. I've always said, I respect those who, for religious or ethical reasons, would not consider terminating their own pregnancy. But if nothing else, freedom must surely mean that women themselves get to make these profoundly intimate decisions, not politicians. And that's why, if Congress passes a bill to restore the reproductive freedom that women had for nearly 50 years and that Donald Trump bragged about taking away, Kamala Harris will sign it into law. That's what Kamala stands for, not concepts of a plan, actual plans to make your lives better, to protect your freedoms. Now, whenever Donald Trump is challenged on his lack of plans on the economy or health care or anything else, he will fall back on his favorite issue, and that is immigration. According to Trump, it does not matter what the issue is. Housing, crime, a lost pet. If you just let him round up whoever he wants, ship them out, all your problems will be solved. America will be great again. So let's talk about immigration for a second. A lot of folks have legitimate concerns about what's happening at our borders. It is critical that the next president work with Democrats and Republicans to make sure our borders are orderly and secure. We are a nation of immigrants. We are also a nation of laws. And we have to make sure that those two things work together. But, you know, whenever the issue of immigration comes up, Donald Trump likes to say it's Kamala Harris's fault. She's been vice president for 4 years. Why didn't she fix it? Wasn't Donald Trump president for 4 years? Why didn't he fix it? If rounding up and deporting millions of desperate people is the answer to everything, why was the number of undocumented immigrants basically the same when Donald Trump left office as when he took office? Think about that. I'll tell you why. Because Donald Trump